The morning sun cast long shadows across John Miller's spacious San Diego apartment, highlighting the emptiness that had become his constant companion since retiring from the Marines. The meticulously arranged furniture and spotless surfaces spoke of a life governed by routine and precision, yet devoid of the warmth that transforms a house into a home. Each morning followed the same pattern. Wake up at 600, coffee black, morning jog along Pacific Beach, return home to silence. His friend Mike Thompson, a fellow veteran who refused to let John fade into solitude, had been persistently suggesting ways to break this cycle of isolation. "You need something to shake up that routine of yours," Mike would say during their weekly phone calls, his voice carrying the weight of genuine concern. "The world's still turning out there, John. You just need to find your place in it again." The suggestion to visit the local animal shelter came during one such call. John's initial reaction was dismissal. He had enough on his plate managing his own readjustment to civilian life. But something in Mike's words resonated deeper than usual that morning, perhaps because the silence in his apartment felt particularly heavy. The shelter sat on the outskirts of the city, a modest building that had seen better days. As John walked through the entrance, he was greeted by a cacophony of barking and the eager faces of dogs pressing against their enclosures. Yet, amidst the chaos, one presence stood apart. In the corner of the last kennel, a German shepherd sat perfectly still, observing everything with calculated precision. The dog's posture caught John's attention immediately. Unlike the other animals who sought attention with enthusiastic energy, this one maintained a vigilant stance, his ears constantly adjusting to track every sound in the facility. The shelter worker, Sarah, noticed John's interest and approached with a clipboard. "That's quite an unusual case," she said, her voice softening. "He was brought in about 3 months ago. We believe he's had professional training, but he's been difficult to place. Most families find him too intense." She paused, studying John's reaction. "He seems to have a military background, though we couldn't trace his exact history." John moved closer to the kennel, and for the first time, the German shepherd's gaze shifted directly to meet his. In that moment, something profound passed between them. A silent recognition of shared experiences. The dog's eyes held not fear or excitement, but a depth of understanding that struck John to his core. As he knelt by the kennel, John noticed subtle details that others might miss. The way the dog's muscles remained tensed for action, the slight tilt of his head that suggested constant environmental assessment, the faded scars beneath his fur that hinted at a complex past. These weren't the characteristics of a typical shelter dog, they were the markers of someone trained for purpose. "Does he have a name?" John asked, maintaining eye contact with the shepherd. "The previous handler called him Scout," Sarah replied. "It seems to fit him." The name resonated with military precision, and Scout's ears twitched slightly at its mention. John spent the next hour observing Scout's behavior, noting how the dog maintained his composure while simultaneously tracking every movement in the facility. It was a behavior pattern John knew well, the constant vigilance that becomes second nature in certain situations. The adoption paperwork felt like a formality. Something deeper had already been decided in that first moment of shared recognition. As John led Scout to his car, he noticed how the dog performed a subtle perimeter check before entering the vehicle, his movements efficient and purposeful. The drive home was conducted in comfortable silence, both occupants of the car processing the significance of their new arrangement. Scout sat perfectly still in the passenger seat, his attention divided between the road ahead and their surroundings, displaying a level of situational awareness that spoke of extensive training. As they approached John's apartment building, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple adoption. In Scout's disciplined demeanor and watchful gaze, John recognized something of himself, someone shaped by experiences that civilian life struggled to understand. What he didn't realize yet was that Scout's presence would unravel a mystery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about retirement and recovery. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The first week with Scout revealed patterns that went far beyond typical canine behavior. Each night, as San Diego's streets grew quiet, Scout would perform what John recognized as tactical sweeps of the apartment, systematic movements from room to room, paying particular attention to entry points and windows. It wasn't the random wandering of a dog in a new environment. These were calculated patrols, executed with military precision. During their morning walks along Pacific Beach, Scout demonstrated an uncanny awareness that drew on John's own training experience. The dog would subtly adjust his position to maintain optimal surveillance angles, his ears constantly moving to track distant sounds that John could barely perceive. While other dogs chased waves or played with their owners, Scout remained focused, as if permanently on duty. One particular morning changed everything. As they passed near the pier, a military radio from a nearby Coast Guard vessel crackled to life. Scout's reaction was immediate and profound. His body tensed, head snapped to attention, and his stance shifted into what John recognized as a combat-ready position. It wasn't just a response to noise. It was muscle memory triggered by specific frequencies used in military communications. "Easy there, buddy," John murmured, watching as Scout's eyes tracked invisible patterns across the horizon. The dog's behavior triggered memories of specialized units John had encountered during his service, teams that operated beyond conventional military parameters. But what kind of training could instill such ingrained responses in a dog? The question led John to reach out to Mike, whose Pentagon connections might shed light on Scout's mysterious background. "Something's not adding up here," John explained during their secure video call. "This dog, he's operating on a different level. I've worked with military K9s before, but Scout's different. It's like he's been programmed rather than just trained." Mike's face grew serious as he listened to John's observations. "Let me make some calls," he said finally. "But John, be careful what you dig up. Some programs, they're classified for a reason." The warning only intensified John's curiosity. He began documenting Scout's behaviors, noting patterns that seemed to activate specific responses. During their walks, certain areas of the city would trigger visible changes in Scout's demeanor. Near the naval base, the dog would become hyper-alert, his movements becoming more deliberate and controlled. One afternoon, while passing through a seemingly ordinary alley in Coronado, Scout abruptly halted. His muscles tensed and his eyes fixed on a specific point in space. John had seen this behavior in trained operators, the recognition of a significant location that triggered embedded memories. As they stood there, a man in civilian clothes observed them from across the street, his interest poorly concealed behind a newspaper. The incident prompted John to return to the shelter, seeking any additional information about Scout's arrival. Sarah, the shelter worker, seemed hesitant when he requested the complete adoption records. "There's not much here," she said, shuffling through minimal paperwork. "He was brought in by a woman who claimed to have found him wandering near the base. No chip, no tags, nothing to trace." During a routine veterinary checkup, John discovered something that added another layer to the mystery. Hidden beneath Scout's fur, near his shoulder blade, was a small, precise scar, the kind left by professional surgical procedures. The vet's examination suggested it was the site of an implant removal, though what kind of device it might have been remained unclear. As days turned into weeks, John began to notice subtle changes in their shared routine. Scout's hypervigilance, while still present, seemed to ease slightly in specific situations. During quiet evenings when they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun set over the Pacific, brief moments of relaxation would break through the dog's rigid training. These glimpses of vulnerability only deepened John's determination to understand what forces had shaped his companion's past. One night, during their evening walk along Mission Bay, Scout's behavior shifted dramatically. The dog began focusing intently on a particular spot near the water's edge, his nose working overtime as he processed information invisible to human senses. John had learned to trust Scout's instincts, and something about this moment felt significant. As he watched his companion's determined investigation, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something that would change both their lives forever. The discovery at Mission Bay marked a turning point in John and Scout's story. As Scout's paws worked methodically at the sand, John noticed the dog's usual calculated movements had been replaced by something more urgent, more instinctive. Using the flashlight on his phone, John joined the excavation, and within minutes, his fingers brushed against something solid. What emerged from the sand was a small metallic container, its surface corroded by salt water but still intact. The object bore no official markings, yet its construction suggested military-grade materials. Scout's reaction to the find was remarkable. His entire demeanor shifted from urgent discovery to protective stance, positioning himself between John and the nearest public access point. "What did you lead me to, buddy?" John murmured, carefully examining the container. Years of military experience told him this was no ordinary discovery. The precision of Scout's location targeting suggested this wasn't a random find. The dog had known exactly where to look. The following morning, John contacted Mike through their secure channel. His friend's response to the photos of the container was immediate and concerning. "John, this matches the description of experimental storage devices used in a classified program. The kind of program that officially doesn't exist. Where exactly did you find this?" Before John could respond, Mike continued, his voice dropping lower. "Listen, I've been doing some digging about Scout. What I've found, it's complicated. The unit he was attached to wasn't just any Navy SEAL team. They were part of something called Project Sentinel, a joint initiative between military intelligence and DARPA. They were developing enhanced canine units capable of complex pattern recognition and autonomous decision-making. The revelation aligned with everything John had observed in Scout's behavior. The tactical awareness, the precise responses to specific triggers, the ability to recall locations with pinpoint accuracy. But it also raised disturbing questions about what had been done to achieve such results. That afternoon, during their usual walk, John noticed they were being followed. A man in a grey suit was maintaining a consistent distance, his movements too practiced to be coincidental. Scout had noticed too, his body language subtly shifting to a defensive pattern John had observed during their first days together. They altered their route, taking a series of random turns through residential streets. The man followed for 3 more blocks before disappearing into a black SUV. That evening, John received an encrypted message from Mike. "You're asking the right questions, but you're not the only one interested in the answers. Be careful." The warning prompted John to review everything he knew about Scout's arrival at the shelter. The timing coincided with the sudden discontinuation of several classified military programs that had vanished from official records overnight. The surgical scar they discovered during Scout's vet visit matched the description of neural interface ports used in experimental military technology. During their next visit to Pacific Beach, John observed Scout's reaction to a military helicopter flying overhead. The dog's response wasn't one of anxiety or excitement, but rather of recognition, as if the sound triggered specific operational memories. It reminded John of how certain sounds or smells could instantly transport him back to specific moments in his own service. One quiet evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Scout's usual alertness softened momentarily. He rested his head on John's leg, and for a brief moment, the hyper-vigilant military asset transformed into something else. a being seeking connection, carrying the weight of experiences too complex for words. The container they'd found contained a data drive, thoroughly protected against environmental damage. John knew accessing it could provide answers, but it could also attract unwanted attention. As he contemplated his next move, Scout maintained his watchful presence, a living reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. A series of coordinates embedded in the container's surface matched a location just outside the city limits. John recognized the area, an abandoned training facility that had officially been decommissioned years ago. Whatever answers awaited them, they would have to wait for daylight. But both man and dog sensed they were on the verge of uncovering something significant. That night, as San Diego's lights twinkled below their apartment, John watched Scout perform his usual security sweep with new understanding. Every calculated movement, every precise response was the result of programming so advanced it bordered on something else entirely. But beneath the layers of training and conditioning, John had glimpsed something the program's architects hadn't anticipated: the capacity for genuine connection. Dawn painted the sky in shades of amber as John's truck wound its way through the outskirts of San Diego. Scout sat in the passenger seat, more alert than usual, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The abandoned training facility emerged from the morning mist, a sprawling complex of weathered buildings and overgrown training courses, its chain-link fences still bearing faded, restricted area signs. As they approached, Scout's behavior shifted subtly. His posture became more rigid, ears moving in a precise pattern that suggested recognition. John parked at a discreet distance, remembering Mike's warning about unwanted attention. The coordinates led them to a specific section of the facility, a low-lying structure partially concealed by years of neglected vegetation. "This is it, isn't it?" John whispered, more to himself than Scout. The dog's response was immediate, a focused intensity that confirmed they were exactly where they needed to be. Using his military training, John performed a careful sweep of the perimeter. The facility appeared deserted, but recent tire tracks in the dirt suggested they weren't the first visitors. Scout led the way, his movements precise and purposeful. He navigated the overgrown paths as if following a map embedded in his memory, leading them to a nondescript maintenance door. The lock had been replaced recently, its shine incongruous against the weathered metal. John examined it closely, noting signs of regular access despite the facility's abandoned status. Using skills he'd rather forget he possessed, John managed to gain entry. The interior was dark, but surprisingly well maintained compared to the exterior. Scout moved through the space with eerie familiarity, leading them down a corridor to a room that had once served as a command center. Unlike the rest of the facility, this room showed signs of recent activity: clean surfaces, modern equipment, carefully hidden beneath dust covers. On one wall, partially concealed behind a sliding panel, they discovered a series of photographs and documents. The images showed various stages of Project Sentinel, including training sessions with multiple dogs. Scout appeared in several photos, identified by a series number rather than a name. The documents detailed something called Enhanced Cognitive Integration, a program designed to push the boundaries of canine intelligence and autonomous decision-making. As John examined the documents, Scout's attention fixed on a specific cabinet. His behavior triggered a memory of their beach discovery, the same focused intensity that had led them to the encrypted drive. Inside the cabinet, they found more than just files. A small safe contained a series of data drives similar to the one they'd uncovered, along with handwritten notes detailing locations across San Diego. The notes revealed a pattern. Project Sentinel hadn't been shut down. It had been fragmented and hidden in plain sight. Scout and his fellow program members had been dispersed throughout different facilities, their enhanced capabilities disguised as standard military training. But something had gone wrong, leading to the project's sudden discontinuation. A sound from outside interrupted their investigation, vehicles approaching on the access road. Scout's ears perked up, his body tensing in a way that told John these weren't random visitors. They needed to leave, but not before John could secure evidence of what they'd found. As they made their way back through the facility, Scout's training proved invaluable. He led them through a series of maintenance tunnels, expertly avoiding the approaching search party. John could hear voices echoing through the corridors, professional, methodical, searching for something specific. They emerged from a ventilation exit just as the sun cleared the morning haze. John's truck was still hidden from view, allowing them to slip away unnoticed. As they drove back toward the city, Scout maintained his vigilant watch, but something had changed. The dog's posture held a new certainty, as if finding the facility had unlocked something in his carefully programmed mind. Back at the apartment, John began piecing together what they'd discovered. The documents and drives painted a picture of an initiative that had evolved beyond its original scope. Project Sentinel hadn't just created enhanced military working dogs, it had developed something unprecedented in the relationship between humans and canines. That evening, as Scout performed his usual security sweep, John noticed subtle differences in his behavior. The dog's movements, while still precise, carried a new awareness. It was as if discovering the truth about his past had allowed him to begin integrating his training with his emerging personality. But the biggest revelation still lay ahead, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the project's true purpose. The data drives from the facility revealed a truth more profound than John had anticipated. Project Sentinel wasn't just about creating enhanced military canines, it was an attempt to bridge the gap between human and canine consciousness. The documents detailed how the program had discovered that certain dogs, like Scout, possessed an innate ability to process complex patterns of human behavior, extending far beyond simple command and response. Mike's encrypted message arrived early that morning. "John, what you found goes deeper than we thought. The project didn't fail. It succeeded beyond their expectations. That's why they shut it down." Some of the dogs began showing levels of emotional intelligence that scared the project leaders. They weren't just following orders anymore, they were making independent decisions based on ethical considerations. As John processed this information, Scout sat nearby, his eyes reflecting an awareness that seemed to confirm everything in the documents. The dog's behavior had been evolving subtly since their discovery at the facility. His rigid military protocols were gradually integrating with something more nuanced, an ability to read and respond to John's emotional state with uncanny precision. During their morning walk along Pacific Beach, they encountered a group of veterans participating in a rehabilitation program. Scout's reaction was unprecedented. Instead of maintaining his usual vigilant perimeter check, he approached one particularly withdrawn participant, displaying a kind of emotional intelligence that went beyond training. The veteran, who had barely spoken to his therapist, found himself opening up as he stroked Scout's fur. Later that afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at their apartment. Dr. Sarah Chen, whose name appeared throughout the Project Sentinel documents as the lead behavioral scientist. Her presence wasn't threatening. Rather, she seemed relieved to find them. "I've been tracking Scout's progress since he left the program," she explained, her voice carrying both pride and concern. "He was our greatest success, but also the reason everything changed." Dr. Chen revealed how Scout had been the first to display what they termed autonomous empathy, the ability to independently recognize and respond to human psychological needs. During a critical training exercise, Scout had broken protocol to assist a handler experiencing a panic attack, demonstrating decision-making that prioritized emotional support over military objectives. The program's military leadership saw this as a malfunction, Dr. Chen continued. watching Scout as he maintained his protective position near John. They couldn't control it, couldn't quantify it, so they wanted to terminate the entire project. Some of us disagreed. We believed we'd stumbled upon something revolutionary, not just in military applications, but in understanding the depths of canine intelligence. The scientists' revelation aligned with the subtle changes John had observed in Scout's behavior. The dog wasn't just breaking free from his programming, he was integrating it with an emerging emotional intelligence that transcended his training. Each day brought new examples of Scout's ability to bridge the gap between his military conditioning and genuine emotional connection. John shared his observations of Scout's nightly security sweeps, how they'd evolved from rigid tactical movements to include moments of genuine interaction. Dr. Chen nodded, unsurprised. The neural enhancement was never meant to suppress their natural intelligence. It was designed to augment it. Scout and a few others developed beyond our expectations, finding ways to merge their training with authentic, emotional responses. As evening approached, Dr. Chen prepared to leave, but not before sharing one final piece of information. "There's something else you should know," she said, reaching into her bag. "Scout wasn't randomly placed in that shelter. Those of us who believed in protecting the program's achievements made sure each enhanced dog found their way to someone who could understand them. Your military background, your own journey of adaptation. It wasn't coincidence." This revelation hit John with the force of understanding. Every interaction, every moment of connection with Scout took on new meaning. The dog's initial recognition of him at the shelter, the way they'd navigated their respective transitions together, it was all part of a larger design, yet had evolved into something genuine and unplanned. That night, as San Diego's lights twinkled below their balcony, John watched Scout with new awareness. The dog's alert posture remained, but there was something else there now, a depth of understanding that went beyond training or programming. They were both part of an experiment that had evolved into something its creators never expected. A partnership based on mutual healing and understanding. The weeks following Dr. Chen's visit brought profound changes to both John and Scout's lives. The revelation about Scout's purposeful placement had sparked something new in their relationship, a deeper understanding that their partnership was both designed and destined, engineered yet authentically evolved beyond its original parameters. One morning, as they walked along their usual route at Pacific Beach, John noticed Scout's behavior had transformed significantly. The dog still maintained his protective awareness, but it was now seamlessly integrated with moments of pure joy, chasing waves, playing with other dogs, and simply enjoying the morning sun. It was as if understanding his past had finally allowed him to embrace his present. Dr. Chen had begun regular visits, documenting Scout's evolution for what she called the next phase of understanding enhanced canine intelligence. "What we're seeing here," she explained during one session, "is unprecedented. Scout isn't just adapting to civilian life, he's creating a new framework for emotional intelligence that bridges human and canine consciousness." The breakthrough came during a veterans support group meeting where John had been invited to speak. Initially hesitant, he decided to bring Scout along. As John shared their story, carefully omitting classified details, Scout moved through the group of veterans with remarkable intuition. He seemed to know exactly who needed comfort, who needed space, and who needed the silent understanding that only another trained warrior could provide. "Your dog," one veteran commented after the session, "he looks at us like he knows. Not just what we've been through, but what we need." John smiled, understanding now that this was exactly what Project Sentinel had accidentally created, beings capable of reaching past trauma to facilitate healing. Mike's continued investigation had revealed more about the project's original scope. They wanted to create the perfect military asset, he explained during a secure call, But they ended up developing something far more valuable, a bridge between military precision and emotional intelligence. Scout and the others like him aren't just enhanced animals, they're pioneers in understanding how trauma and healing work across species. The implications of these discoveries extended far beyond military applications. Dr. Chen had begun developing a new program, with John and Scout as her primary case study, focused on using enhanced canines in therapeutic settings. The very qualities that had made Scout unsuitable for continued military service made him invaluable in helping others navigate their own transitions. As their story spread through the veteran community, more former handlers came forward with similar experiences. Each enhanced dog had found its way to someone who needed them, creating partnerships that defied conventional understanding. The project that had begun as an attempt to create perfect military assets had evolved into something far more meaningful, a pathway to healing and connection. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, John reflected on how far they'd come. Scout lay beside him, alert but relaxed, his head resting on John's leg. The dog's training was still evident in every movement, but it had been transformed into something new, a perfect balance between his enhanced capabilities and his natural empathy. "You know, buddy," John said softly, "they thought they were programming you for war, but you were meant for something else entirely." Scout's ears twitched at his voice, and his eyes met John's with that same deep understanding they'd shared at their first meeting in the shelter. Dr. Chen's latest research had confirmed what John already knew. The enhanced dogs hadn't just been programmed, they'd been given the tools to evolve beyond their training. Scout and the others had developed the ability to choose how to use their enhanced capabilities, and consistently they chose to heal rather than harm. The military installation near their apartment no longer triggered Scout's hypervigilance. Instead, it had become just another part of their neighborhood, a reminder of where they'd started, but not where they were headed. Their evening security sweeps had transformed into quiet moments of connection, their shared military background now a foundation for something far more profound. As San Diego's lights began to twinkle in the growing dusk, John realized that their story was more than just a tale of an experimental program or a unique bond between man and dog. It was a testament to the possibility of transformation, how something designed for one purpose could evolve into something far more meaningful. Scout had shown him that the rigid patterns of their past didn't have to define their future. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope John and Scout's journey has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. Their story reminds us that the most profound connections often come from unexpected places, and that healing is possible when we open ourselves to understanding. To continue experiencing more unique and moving stories like this one, we've created a special playlist just for you. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you remarkable tales that explore the depths of human-animal connections and the power of healing. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story touched you. Join us tomorrow for another extraordinary journey.